Good afternoon. My name is Paul Rudensky. I am the Senior Director for Education here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm pleased to welcome all of you to this afternoon's program, which is entitled Jewish DPs in Italy, Seeking a New Home in the Middle of a Refugee Crisis. Italy occupies a unique place in Jewish history, or at least in Jewish imagination. In antiquity, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the Counter-Reformation, Italy played a crucial role in the development of Ashkenazic Jewry and later also Sephardic Jewry. Although it has been the seat of the papacy, Italy nevertheless was comparatively tolerant of its Jewish population. By the modern period, Jews in Italy were well integrated, and anti-Semitism was not particularly virulent, at least not until well into the fascist regime. The history of Italy during the war is very complicated, so I'm going to leave it to our speaker today. But let me just say now that during the war, Italians were largely sympathetic to the Jews. Nevertheless, when Germany occupied the northern two-thirds of the country, the Germans and the Italian fascists managed to catch some 8,000 Jews and send them to their deaths. Even before the end of the war, the southern part of Italy became a haven for Jewish refugees, something that expanded further at the war's end. In a few minutes, we will learn about the extraordinary rebirth of Jewish life that got its start on Italian soil. Our speaker today is Dr. Chiara Renzo. She is a postdoctoral fellow in contemporary history at the University of Florence. In 2017, she earned a PhD in history from the joint doctoral program of the University of Florence and Siena, successfully defending her dissertation entitled, "Where Shall I Go? Jewish Displaced Persons in Italy, 1943 to 1951. For her doctoral research, she has received the support of the Claims Conference through the Saul Kagan Fellowship Program in Advanced Shoah Studies. Between 2017 and 2019, Chiara has been the recipient of the Rothschild Foundation HaNadiv Europe Postdoctoral Fellowship at, I'm going to mispronounce this, Ca' Foscari University of Venice, and in 2019 in the Baron Friedrich Karl von Oppenheim Chair for the Study of Racism, Anti-Semitism, and Holocaust Fellowship. Okay, let me say this again. She was the recipient of the Rothschild Fellowship and the Baron in Venice, and the Baron Friedrich Karl von Oppenheim Chair, I guess, Fellowship for the Study of Racism, Anti-Semitism, and Holocaust at Yad Vashem. Chiara's research and publication in English and Italian deal with several aspects of the Jewish displacement in Italy, Jewish children and youth after the Holocaust, the fascist internment system, international humanitarianism during and after the Second World War. She is currently working on a monograph in English resulting from her PhD dissertation. Chiara is also involved in the Shoah professional development programs for school teachers at the University of Florence. So we're very excited that she's here today and joining us. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the museum's president and CEO, Jack Klieger, who's with us today, as well as our vice president for education, Elizabeth Edelstein. Our plan for today is as follows. Dr. Renzo will speak for approximately 40 to 45 minutes, after which time we will invite questions from the teachers attending the program. Please note that we hope to end at around 2 p.m. Please feel free to use the chat function to submit questions, which will be read after Dr. Renzo's presentation. Tomorrow, I will send you a link to an online evaluation form. Please plan to spend a few minutes completing it. Your feedback is important to us. I would like to take a moment to thank the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany for funding today's program. Without further ado, I am pleased to hand our microphone over to our speaker today, Dr. Chiara Renzo.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today, and I would like to thank the Museum of Jewish Heritage for inviting me. And I'm very happy to share with you the results of my research and also to contribute to this professional development program. So I will go to share my screen. Okay. So I think that a helpful starting point for our talk today, in order to frame the experience of the Jewish DPs in Italy in a broader context, in the context of the refugee crisis in post-war Europe, could be the definition of World War II as primarily a civilian experience. This definition was a definition by Tony Judd, the historian Tony Judd, in his book Post-War, where he stressed the fact that, in contrast to what had happened during World War I, during World War II, military operations were concentrated mainly at the beginning and at the end of the war, while the whole 6-year conflict was essentially a long time of occupation, deportation, repression, and exploitation of civilians. Numbers can also help us to frame this experience of the Jewish refugees after the Shoah. Between 1939 and 1945, more than 36 million Europeans died because of the war. Among them, there were 19 million civilians, and we know that also millions of Jews were included in these numbers. In addition, World War II was originated in Europe, a mass movement that led to the greatest refugee crisis in Europe until that time. About 30 million people had been forced to move during the war. And few months after the end of the war, when the Allies had already repatriated 6 million people, there were still 7 million people outside the borders of their home countries, living in the DP camp in need of any kind of help. So if we want to define who were the refugees of the war, we can distinguish mainly 3 macro groups. The first where the largest group was that of former forced laborers. They were men and women who had been recruited by the Nazi to work in German farms and factories all across the continent. Most of them were from Eastern European countries, and we estimated that in 1944 there were 6 million of forced laborers involved in Nazi industry. This forced movement can be defined as the largest involuntary economic migration and as the primary social experience of World War II. So it essentially was the first reason that forced people to move during the war. The second group is the group of the survivors of political, racial, and religious persecutions. And the third group is that of prisoners of war. So we can say that most of the Jews were part of the first 2 macro groups that we identified. However, even if the Allies began soon to repatriate as much refugees as possible at the end of the war, people continued to move across Europe even after the end of the war. So we should think that in addition to these categories of refugees originated by the war itself, there were other groups of refugees originated from post-war peace treaties, the redefinition of the borders, and the establishment of new national governments after 1945. The liberation was a crucial but not an easy moment for Jewish survivors. For those who have survived, the end of the war did not mean either the natural recovery of their pre-war life or the immediate reconstruction of a new experience. And during this presentation, I would like to include also the voices of the refugees themselves. So let me show you a testimony from Holocaust survivors who was able, to describe. Sorry, I'm not so good. Sorry. I try from here. So this is a testimony from Shmuel Shiloh, who was a Holocaust survivor. And who was also a DP in Italy, who as a teenager described his feeling after the end of the war at the liberation. So let me try.
ב-9 למאי הודיעו על סיום המלחמה. אני זוכר את היום הזה מדויק. אנשים רקדו ברחובות. חיילים השתכרו. אני זוכר, זרקו כובעים. הייתה שמחה אדירה. נגמרה המלחמה, זהו זה. אנשים יחזרו לבתים. היחידים שלא שמחו היינו אנחנו. איש מאיתנו לא שמח. המלחמה הסתיימה והעצב נשאר. ולא שנדברנו, שזה לא שמחה בשבילנו. כל יהודי פתאום היה יותר עצוב מהרגיל. אני פגשתי את פראג. פראג הייתה יפהפייה, כל כך אהבתי לטייל. אתה כאילו שוכח את עצמך. פתאום, סוף המלחמה, אנשים מתנשקים, אנשים רוקדים, שותים. ואנחנו, כל אחד לחוד. המילה עצוב לא מבטא את התחושה הפנימית של כל אחד מאיתנו. לא שדיברנו, כל אחד חווה את זה בנפרד, כבודד.
So let me go back to my PowerPoint. In liberated Europe, thousands of Jews who had survived the war in one way or another tried to return home during summer 1945, but poured into the refugee camps on realizing that their communities had been annihilated, their properties had been occupied, their relatives had died or had been displaced, and that anti-Semitism was still so widespread that it would be extremely unsafe and painful for them to resettle there. So they took one of the few opportunities to start a new life, which was applying for the status of displaced persons in order to receive the help of the international organization to resettle, to be included in a resettlement program outside of Europe. So for many Jewish survivors, the liberation marked another long period of waiting and uncertainty, which for most of them was in the refugee camps. At this point, I think it's necessary a short premise to explain why Italy played a major role in these circumstances. We know that the number of Jewish DPs in refugee camps in Germany cannot be compared with those in Italy. For instance, at the end of 1946, there were 180,000 Jews in the refugee camps in Germany and only 19,000 in Italy, plus another 50,000 in Austria. However, beside numbers, Italy became a key site for the Jewish DPs who saw this country as the gate to Zion, the last stop before reaching Palestine. Why? After the war, for its strategic position, Italy became the headquarters of the Mossad le-Aliyah, which was the secret branch of the Jewish agency, which at that time was the institution representing the Jewish settlement in Palestine. The Mossad was in charge of organizing the legal Aliyah of the Jewish DPs from Europe, and Italy was its main headquarters. Aliyah in Hebrew is the Hebrew term meaning ascent, and normally is used to refer to the immigration of the Jews from the diaspora to Palestine before 1948 and to Israel after 1948. Why we are talking about illegal Aliyah? because Palestine was at that time under the British mandate, and the British government established really strict quotas on Aliyah in the attempt to calm down the protests between the Arab and the Jewish local population. So these limits were valid during the war and until 1948, from 1938 to 1948, when the State of Israel was established. For this reason, even if the number of the Jewish DPs in Italy were quite small if compared to that in Germany, Italy attracted many of them after the war. Around 60 ships left from Europe with the underground operation of the Mossad, le-Aliyah, and almost half of them left from Italian harbors. The journey to Palestine was very hard because the ships were crowded, not always well equipped, and because also, and above all, because the Jewish survivors risked to be intercepted by the Allies and deported to Cyprus detention camp. When we talk about the Jewish DPs in Italy, we can distinguish two main groups of Jewish DPs. In archival sources, they are called old refugees and new refugees. The old refugees were those foreign Jews who arrived in Italy before Italy joined the war in 1940. And when Italy still welcomed migrants, including Jews, or those, this definition of all the refugees include also those Jews who have been deported from Italian occupied territories, from Yugoslavia or from North Africa. These foreign Jews were interned in concentration camps as enemy aliens when Italy joined the war in 1940. When I say Italian concentration camps, you should not associate them with Nazi extermination camps. Italian concentration camps were used by the fascist government to gather all those people considered as a threat to the public order or the national security, and the living conditions in this internment camp were very different from one case to the next, and ranged from bearable to inhuman. In 1943, there were more than 60,000 non-Italian Jews interned in Italy. When the Allies landed in Italy from North Africa in 1943, they liberated in the southern region all those people interned by the fascist government. The situation is clear if you have a look to this map. In this moment, Italy is split into two parts. The south is in Allies' hands, but the central and northern regions, which are basically the region where most of the Italian Jews communities were located, were still in Nazi and fascist hands. In this moment, Jews start to be deported by the Nazis in collaboration with the fascists from central and northern Italy to Nazi extermination camps. Between 1943 and the end of the war, almost 7,000 Jews were deported from Italy, both Italian Jews and non-Italian Jews. So we have two different situations in 1943 Italy: deportation and liberation. In particular, in September 1943, the Allies liberated the biggest concentration camps in Italy, which was located in Ferramonti di Tarzia, in the foot of the Italian woods. Here, if you can see my arrow, where they found around 2,000 foreign Jews, which became the first group of Jewish DPs in Italy. And they were the so-called old refugees. Until the end of the war, this group grew because other Jews interned in other places were liberated by the advancing army, and other Jews came from the Balkans, crossing the sea, and joined the group of the old refugees. So eventually, at the end of the war, this group formed a group of 6,000 Jewish DPs. 70% of them were Yugoslavs, and the other were German, Austrian, and Czechoslovakian Jews. In 1945, the demographic profile of the Jewish DPs changed completely. Until the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, we estimate around 20,000 Jewish DPs living every year in Italy, and most of them, the 70% of them, were of Polish origin. The others were Romanian, Hungarians, and Germans, and other Central and Eastern European nationalities. Those who arrived after the end of the war are known as new refugees. The liberation of Ferramonti concentration camps in 1943, before the end of the war, represent a crucial moment, because this is the first meeting between the Jewish refugees and the Jewish soldiers. These ones were Jews living in Palestine who voluntarily joined the British Army, first in North Africa in 1948 and later in 1943 in Italy. At the beginning, they operated in different military units, but at the end of 1944, they established the most known Jewish brigade. The role of the Jewish soldiers and chaplains in the British Army is extremely important. We should think that the war was still going on and the humanitarian missions were still not allowed to work in Europe. Moreover, Italy was also an enemy country, and the United Nations were debating about granting Italy international help. So in this context, the work of the Jewish soldiers was groundbreaking. On the one hand, they served as mediator between the British Army and the Jewish DPs, reporting the specific needs of the Jewish DPs. And second, they solicited the international interest in the situation of the Jewish survivors in Italy, sending letters and reports to Jewish institutions and Jewish communities in Palestine, North Africa, South Africa, asking clothes, food, and all kinds of material help. Third, after 1945, so after the end of the war, they helped the Jewish survivors to illegally cross the Alps and enter Italy in order to speed up their immigration to Palestine. But most important, in 1944, they established the Merkaz Aplitim, the refugee center in Bari, which later changed its name in Merkaz Lagola, the diaspora center, and moved to Rome. Through this center, the Jewish soldiers coordinated immediate relief activities, but also started a program of educational, social, cultural, political activities, and all kinds of rehabilitation activities. The soldiers opened, for example, school for children. You can see also the photos in the slide, giving them the chance to study again after many years of during the war. Children couldn't study, so this was an important opportunity for them. They teach to the children. They wrote the books for the children. They organized meetings to tell the Jewish DPs about their life in the kibbutzim in Palestine. They encouraged the Jewish DPs to learn agricultural and manual labor. They support and train them ideologically and practically to migrate to Palestine. For this particular reason, the Jewish soldiers decided to create specific environments or specific installation where the Jewish DPs could receive the necessary training for Aliyah. So they established the Aksharot, communitarian life, and could taste the kibbutz lifestyle. I would like to show you again a testimony from an Holocaust survivor, Shmuel Shilo. We have seen him before, who described the meaning of the first encounter with the Jewish soldiers and the Jewish survivors. So I hope I will be able to do so.
אנחנו רואים לפנינו משאיות עם מגן דוד, ושם עומדים חיילים
של הבריגד.
וצועקים כל הזמן מהר, 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 מהר. ואנחנו מגיעים למשאיות ואומרים, תעלו מהר, ואנחנו לא מסוגלים. אנחנו רואים פעם הראשונה חיילים יהודים עם תו, חלק מדברים יידיש, רובם מדברים עברית, אבל חלק ידעו יידיש, חלק שלא מבינים יידיש. הם עומדים ומזרזים אותם, ואנחנו עומדים ובוכים. הסתובבתי כמו סהרורי. מכוניות עם מגן דוד, חיילים עם מגן דוד ועם נשק. מדברים כולם עברית, פקודות בעברית. אני כבר לא מדבר על האוכל בשפע. חבר'ה על אופנועים. אבא קובנר עולה על המשאית, לפניו אופנוע, עם הרעש של אופנוע כדי לפנות לו דרך. שולטים. זה היה מהפך אדיר ונורא נורא גם רגיש. את הימים האלה אני לא אשכח לעולם, כי זאת הייתה הפעם הראשונה שאתה פוגש חיילים או יהודים שהם רוצים שתאכל, שהם רוצים שתתלבש, שמגינים עליך, שדואגים לך, שהם רוצים רק לטובתך.
Okay, so at the end of the war, in order to encourage European Jews to make Aliyah, the Jewish agency sent in the refugee camps in Germany, Austria, and Italy the delegates of the Zionist youth movements, at that time representing the political forces of the Jewish settlement in Palestine. As a consequence, the refugee camps, especially those in Italy, which was the headquarters of the Mossad le-Aliyah, became highly politicized environments. We can say that Zionism intended for some Jewish DPs as a form of political affiliations, and for others, in a less political terms, as a sense of belonging to a community, characterize each aspect of the Jewish DPs experience in the refugee camps. The presence of the delegates created excitement and increased the desire of the Jewish DPs to leave Europe as soon as possible and restart their new lives in Palestine. But also it created tensions and disappointment because of the long waiting in the refugee camps. Some of the Jewish DPs waited in the refugee camps for 2 years, for 3 years, even 5 years. So it's quite difficult to frame the role of the delegates in a univocal way. I think that Ada Sereni, which was an Italian Jewish woman who played a leading role in the operation of the Mossad le-Aliyah in Italy, gave a more realistic analysis of the role of the Zionist delegates. In her memoir regarding her experience in post-war Italy, she said that the presence of the delegates and their activities in the refugee camps were at the same time deleterious, but also very important, very crucial. On the one hand, with the Zionist propaganda, delegates mainly aim to have more people affiliated to their parties and therefore gaining more immigration quotas to Palestine. On the other, they were the driving force of the cultural life in the DP camps and encouraged the Jewish DPs to study, to learn a trade, to play in orchestra, or to revive the Jewish traditional theater, to celebrate the Jewish festivities and tradition, and to play, for example, all kinds of sports. Here we can see some pictures from the refugee camps. You can see the refugee dancing the typical Israeli dance, the hora. Some refugees who establish a small orchestra. In the center, you can see some refugees organized in a akshara, and also some refugees working, learning how to work the land. Again, I would like to show you a testimony which explain what the experience in the aksharot meant for the Jewish DPs.
שמה כבר הגיעו החיילים בריגדה ואמרו לנו שרוצים להקים לנו הכשרה, כי אנחנו הולכים לארץ ישראל. והגיע אחד ושני והרצאות, והכניסו לנו את זה לאט לאט לראש. היה מטבחון, וכל שבוע אישה אחת הייתה אחראית על אוכל שהייתה מבשלת לכולם. מה זה אומר? היינו מקבלים קונסרבים, והיינו נותנים לאיטלקים קונסרבים, ולתמורת זה הם נתנו לנו ביצים, קראנו לזה קמביה וובי, וגם ירקות, ואז כל פעם אישה אחת הייתה מבשלת אוכל בשביל כולם. אמא שלי הייתה מבשלת הכי טובה, וכולם חיכו שמטילדה קראו לה שהיא תבשל, ואז יש אוכל טוב. הייתה עושה מהקורן ביף כל מיני פצ'קרה. המיס אותנו על מסעיות, לא ידענו מה פתאום. עכשיו אני לא זוכרת אם פה כבר או בשני כבר הגיעו הבריגדה, החיילים, ואז הם אמרו שהם מקימים הכשרה, אבל רק ילדים בלי הורים, הכשרה לזה. והקימו לנו הכשרה במקום שאני גם לא יודעת איך קוראים לו. היה לנו ככה, מדריך שהוא היה חייל מגשר, קיבוץ גשר, קראו לו יוסף לשמן, ואנחנו אהבנו אותו, זה אי אפשר לתאר, הוא היה בשבילנו אלוהים. עכשיו, תחשבי דבר אחד, החיילים האלה לא באו כל יום הביתה, הם התגעגעו לארץ בצורה בלתי רגילה, ואת כל הגעגועים האלה הם העבירו אלינו. אנחנו חשבנו שארץ ישראל זה משהו שאי אפשר להשיג אותו בכלל, גן עדן.
מה הוא סיפר?
הוא סיפר כל כך דברים טוב, הוא היה יקה. הוא היה יקה שגם התחנך בחברת נוער. מה הוא סיפר? על הקיבוץ, וכמה שזה נפלא, וכמה שזה טוב. ומה אני אגיד לך? זה שלנו. אני לא יכולה לזכור, אבל הוא, בשבילנו זה, אם אנחנו נגיע לארץ ישראל, אנחנו הגענו לגן עדן.
So this vivid cultural and social and political life in the refugee camps in Italy was possible thanks to the support of the refugee agencies of the UN. First, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, and later the International Refugee Organization, and several Jewish organizations. First and foremost, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which is also known as the Joint. After the end of the war, when the UN decided to send humanitarian aid in Italy, the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, started its mission in the refugee camps and operated until 1947, when it was replaced by the IRO, the International Refugee Organization, operating until 1951, which marked the Geneva Convention relating to the refugee status and the beginning of the mission of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. World War II marked a turning point for international humanitarianism, which adopted a new approach in dealing with the refugee crisis. For the first time, the humanitarian missions not only provided immediate relief, so food, clothes, medical care, and so on, but also long-term rehabilitation program, which could help the refugees to restart their lives. So school, vocational trainings, cultural, recreational activities were all part of this rehabilitation program. The Joint was also an extremely important organization, both for the Jewish DPs and the reconstruction of the Italian Jewish community. In Italy, the Joint gained a great extent of autonomy from the UN agency, so it coordinated, supervised, and support all these activities in the DP camps. Life in the DP camp represented for the Jewish DPs a long time of waiting, and at the same time also the first step towards the reconstruction of their life. Living conditions in the refugee camps were not easy. The DPs were have to struggle for better food, for kosher food. They often lived in overcrowded camps. There were no privacy for families. They lived in a sort of forced collective life. But this collective dimension of the experience of the displacement represent also the driving force of the Jewish DP's life in the DP camps. They did not share the same experience during the war, but they all shared the trauma of loss, intended in a broader sense of loss, the loss of family, the loss of home, the loss of their pre-war life. And however, most of all, they all share the same wish to start a new life. The greatest evidence of this wish are the high birth rate in the DP camps, and also the great numbers of weddings celebrated in the DP camps, as you can see also in these pictures. Were all the Jewish DP Zionists? Of course not. Some of them were Zionists, some of them were not, some of them approached Zionism only the DP camps. However, we can say that these Zionist-oriented programs promoted by the Jewish soldiers and embraced by the Jewish DPs was helped the Jewish DPs to create a sense of belonging to a community. And this training for Aliyah make the Jewish DPs active subjects in this long waiting for emigration, and the chance to illegally sail for Palestine appeared to them as a more concrete and fast opportunity to leave Europe instead of waiting for a visa to go to other countries, which was a difficult option. As I said before, around 60 ships left from Europe with the underground operation of the Mossad le-Aliyah, and almost half of them left from Italian harbors. This was possible especially because Italians took a blind eye on these illegal ships in a sort of belated attempt to atone for their fascist period, but also for pragmatic and political reasons. First, the immediate interest of the Italians was to do all they could do to reduce the size of the refugee problems they were confronting after the war, because in Italy there were many internal refugees and Italians returning to Italy from Italian occupied territories and Italian colonies. Second, the Italians were not so happy to cooperate with the British in stopping the Mossad operation and had no particular sympathy for the British, who between 1943 and 1947 occupied the country, adopting a very hard line and imposing unsatisfactory conditions for Italy in the peace treaties. And third, but most important reason, Italians were very careful to not take any action that might damage their relation with the US, who officially supported the Jewish migration to Palestine and whose goodwill and aid were for Italian economic rehabilitation very important, and also for Italy advancing in the international forum and in peace talks. This picture that you can see here represents the hunger strike organized by the Jewish DPs during the so-called La Spezia affair, which was the central event of the Mossad in Italy. La Spezia is a city in Liguria region, which is very close to the French border. In April 1946, the Italian police intercepted a convoy of 38 army trucks carrying more than 1,000 Jewish refugees on the way to La Spezia, from where they were supposed to illegally sail for Palestine. While before, the Italian police took a blind eye on these illegal movements and on the illegal ships of the Mossad. This time, Italian police stopped these convoys because of a misunderstanding. The police thought that people in the convoys was a group of fascists escaping Italy and notified this movement to the British allies. However, in this occasion, the Mossad was able to turn this misunderstanding in its favor. The refugees were transferred to the port of La Spezia, to the ships under guard, where they were confined for 1 month. As you can see in the picture, the Mossad organized this protest, this hunger strike, that attracted the attention of the global media and put the British under pressure. The Italians showed their solidarity and brought food to the refugees on the ships. The journals all over the world reported about the situation in La Spezia. And only after 1 month, the British government allowed the refugees to leave for Palestine. What happened after the establishment of the State of Israel? The new Israeli government eventually opened the door of the country to the mass migration of the Jews. And as you can imagine, Jewish DPs migrated en masse to Israel. However, in 1948 did not mark the end of the Jewish DP presence in the DP camps of Italy, because a few thousands of them stayed in Italy until the early 1950s. They were mainly Jews who were waiting for a visa to North America or Australia to reunite with relatives or to avoid the 1948 war in Israel. Or they were also Jewish DPs who were disabled or chronically ill, whose health conditions did not make them ideal candidates for any resettlement program. So the JDC, the Joint, developed a specialized recovery program in order to facilitate their resettlement in recovery facility in Israel. And also between 1948 and 1949, the Joint estimated around 8,000 Jews illegally landing in Italy from Libya. They tried to escape the difficult situation in their country and to enter the refugee camps in Italy in order to get the help of the international organization to make Aliyah. Here you can see in the photo a group of Libyan Jews who were deported from Libya to Italian concentration camps in 1942 for their English nationality. They were Libyan Jews holding a British passport, but living in Libya. They were interned in concentration camps between 1942 to 1945, and they were deported mainly to Bergen-Belsen and to France, but they were able to return to their home countries after many years. To conclude, I would like to show you the online exhibition from where I took all the images and also all the video testimony, which is this online exhibition of Yad Vashem, DP camps and Aksharot in Italy after the war. Let me try if I can share with you. Connection is a little bit slow. but I think it's a useful link and tool also for you if you want to read more or to watch more video testimonies. This is the link. So I think I can stop share my screen. And thank you very much for your attention. And sorry for the technical problems. Even if it's more than one year we are using Zoom, I'm not able to do this movement quickly. Sorry.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Chiara. That was really a fascinating presentation and really exciting to learn about the situation in Italy and the DPs and how they were able to really rebuild their life with the help of the the various agencies, the UN and the Jewish agencies. I'd like to at this point invite the teachers here to present questions on the chat, and I'll read those to Chiara. But I wanted to ask a question, and the question I just wanted to ask is, and Chiara, we told you we would ask this question, which is, so for the teachers here, many of them are high school teachers, some of them are in public schools, some are in Jewish schools. How would this material be useful, or what would you pull out of this material for those teachers?
I think it's important to include also this, the story, the experience of the Jewish DPs in the Shoah program that teacher can develop in school, because I think it's important to shed light on the consequence of the war, because the Shoah had a lot of consequence on Jewish individual lives, but also on the Jewish communities in Europe. It changed completely the Jewish presence, the Jewish demography of the European Jews. So it's extremely important to stress also the consequence of the war and how we can intertwine the experience of the Jews in the broader European context or global context, because after the war, I think that the responsibility to find a solution to the refugee crisis, not only to the Jewish refugee crisis, was an international responsibility. So it's important to include this when we study and when we teach about the Shoah. It's also important to stress the role of Italy. In this case, we talk about Italy after the war, but Italy had a role also during the war, which is often overlooked. But I mean, Italy had an ambiguous attitude towards the Jews before the war and also during the war. But these concentration camps, Italian concentration camps, the racial policy in Italy was part of a system that contributed to the deportation and extermination of the Jews. So it's also important to include the role of Nazi allies countries such as Italy. And also, it's these stories, the experience of the Jews can shed light also on a positive experience of rebirth and collective and communitarian life in the refugee camps. Sometimes we saw stories of solidarities between the locals, the Italians, and the Jewish DPs. So it's important also to see the other side. What happened after the Holocaust, if people try to atone for their past. So I think these are the main reasons in my point of view.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. That's really very, very helpful. I just wanted, there was a question that came up about actually about Shmuel Shiloh, who you presented a couple of times. And he apparently, Liz pointed out that he did become an Israeli actor, director, and producer. One of the teachers was asking about that. So I'm just going to look and see here about some of the other questions here. All right, well, one of the teachers mentions that her father was one of the Allied forces from South Africa who was stationed in Italy during the war. Oh, here's a good question. And you just mentioned this, but maybe you could fill it out a little bit. Can you give some examples of solidarity of the Italians towards the DPs?
Okay, so about Shmuel Shiloh, I found his testimony also in the oral history archives of the of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he gave an interesting descriptions of his experience in the DP camps, because he arrived in Italy when he was a teenager, and he explained what the meeting between these children, these young people, and the Jewish soldiers mean in that particular context. He explained that the aksharot, because there were aksharot for adults, but also aksharot for children. We also can say children homes, but they served as aksharot. And he was in one of the first akshara established in southern Italy, and he was very excited about his experience. So he had a positive experience inside the aksharot. Sometimes some children were not so happy to be separated from their parents and live in aksharot in order to get the visa earlier to go to Palestine. But he arrived alone in Italy, and he was very, very happy and spoke really in beautiful terms about his experience. About the South Africans serving in the Allied Army, there were a lot of South Africans, and I think that also the South African Jewish appeal played a major role in helping the Jewish DPs, but also in the reconstruction of the Jewish communities in Italy, especially in Rome. And about solidarity, one of the example is what happened in La Spezia when the Jewish survivors, the Jewish DPs, had to stay there for 1 month. So the local population brought them food and show their solidarity with the situation. But also in daily life, I think that Gila Eitan spoke about the Jewish DPs gave some food to the Italians because the Jewish DPs got the help from the international organization. So they received some type of food that the Italian didn't have at the time. So they changed food. She said cambia uovi. I don't know how to translate this.
They exchange things.
Exchange, yeah. They exchange usually foods or something that they need in daily life.
Barter. They traded back and forth.
Yeah. And in general, in the testimonies of the Jewish DPs, they always remember with grateful, and they are grateful to Italians for their help. But I must say that there are also some documents that show that at some point the presence of the refugees, not only the Jewish refugees, but in general, this presence of refugees in Italy was not so tolerated in some areas, but just because they were not, it was hard for the Italian police to control the movement, the illegal movement of the refugees, and in some circumstances they were seen as a threat to political order. So some accidents happen in the DP camps, but these are cases, non-isolated cases, I would say. But the presence, of course, of the refugees in Italy, in post-war Italy, was quite difficult because Italy was in a really bad condition, and it was hard for the Italian government to take the responsibility to care for the refugees.
Right. No, thank you. Here's another question. In which cities in Italy did those Jewish refugees who were not in the DP camps end up living? In other words, where were there Jewish refugees in Italy outside of DP camps?
Okay. Refugee camps were, I think, in every region, mainly on the coast, on the borders with Austria, and I think in any Italian regions there were DP camps. The Jewish DPs were mainly in Puglia, which is the hill of Italy, the south of the hill, where there were 4 DP camps, which hosted until 1947 most of the Jewish DPs in Italy, almost 1/3 of the Jewish DPs in Italy. Also the Rome area, all around Rome, there were a lot of Aksharot, like a network of Aksharot around Rome. And there were 2 main transit camps which had a mixed population of Jews and non-Jews in Bari and in Cinecittà, which is the Italian Hollywood, the Italian film studios. And also in the area close to Turin, there were DP camps. In the area close to Milan, which was the place where the DPs arrived and were distributed in the DP camps in Italy. And there were also DP who lived outside of the DP camps. They received a different kind of help from the UN agency, but they received some help. And most of them, of course, were located in the area where the Italian Jewish community were based: Rome, Milan, Florence, mainly. Bari. It's interesting to note that in Bari, before the war, there wasn't any Jewish community, but after the war, were the refugees themselves who established the Jewish community in Bari. So it's interesting to note also which consequence this transit of Jewish DPs had left in Italy.
So just a follow-up question. So did some of the people who, some of the DPs, the refugees, did they stay in Italy? So after 1951, did they stay, like you mentioned, Bari, did they create an ongoing community there?
I think that very few of them stay in Italy. Some of them married some Italian woman or men, so they stay in Italy, but most of them left Italy during 1948, but in the 50s, those who stay more time.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. My pleasure. I just wanted to note that we have a number of comments here about people whose parents or other relatives went through Italy and they had a very positive experience with the Italians and felt that the Italians were very generous. Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of positive remarks. Well, listen, since it's 2 o'clock, maybe this is a good time to bring things to a close. I just want to thank you so much for a really fascinating presentation. And, you know, I liked what you said about presenting, you know, the story of the refugees in a broader context. I'd also like to just say that, you know, the videos that you showed, I thought were really moving. They really, especially the Shmuel Shiloh, who was I'm not surprised that he was an actor because his voice is so beautiful, but really it's a great presentation, and
thank you.
I want to thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating today, the Claims Conference. I want to thank Jack Klieger, who's our president, who's here today, and Elizabeth Edelstein, who's our vice president of education, who's here today. And with that, I want to wish everybody a great afternoon. And again, thank you, Chiara Renzo, for a wonderful talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.